Hello and welcome to the Hospice Education Podcast, where we explore topics that help us grow as professionals. Today, we're talking about something that can feel tricky, but is really important: managing assertiveness. Whether you're a nurse, social worker, volunteer, or in a non-clinical role, assertiveness can make a huge difference in how we communicate and care for others. Joining me today is Mandy, who has years of experience in supporting teams with communication skills. Hi, Mandy. How you doing?
Hello, Leanne. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good. Perhaps you could just start by introducing yourself and sharing your experience in communication and hospice care.
Okay, so I'm head of hospice education. I've worked in the end-of-life palliative care sector now for 10 and a half years. And I've got, I think, a really good knowledge now of some of the skills that we use very well, some of the areas that need maybe a little bit of tweaking, and also an awareness of how difficult it can be when we're all really, really busy to maintain that balance. And in this case, in today's subject, assertiveness, between what we need and what others might need and how we can work with that. So prior to coming into hospice education, I was a teacher trainer, teaching teachers how to communicate well with adult learners. I also delivered a lot of sessions around the need to be very mindful of where the language that you use and the I statements and where you are.
Sure.
So really today's session is to just unpick that a little bit with people that can just log in, listen to the podcast, and maybe just change or tweak how they're dealing with difficult situations. That's what I hope today will achieve. And really being very aware that when we're stressed, when we're busy, when we are trying to get our own way, it's very easy to move from being assertive to quite aggressive. And you know, none of us are perfect, but if we're thinking about it, then hopefully we can make those changes.
Sure. So maybe let's start with the basics. Assertiveness is a word that we hear a lot in everyday life, but what does it really mean in practice?
Okay, so for me, I think assertiveness is around making sure that you're offering a balanced approach to communication with colleagues. It can be difficult, and I think there is that, you know, I've got a description that assertiveness is asking for what you want, being mindful that you may not get it, be clear about what you want to achieve from that discussion.
Sure.
It needs to be based on balance. So assertiveness is not, I'm going to have everything I want, etc. Being forthright about your wants and needs while still considering the rights and needs and wants of others. That sounds lovely. And that's what I think assertiveness is.
Sure. And so bringing it into the hospice profession, why is it such an important topic for professionals and volunteers that work in the sector?
I think it's really important for anybody and everybody in all elements of life. However, I think in the hospice environment, there can be a time when people forget that we're all important in the end result. So whether you're a clinician, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a retailer, whichever part of the hospice development and departments you're in, it's around being able to have those frank and honest discussions and all feel that you're moving in one direction. So for me, I think it is, you know, to answer your question, I think it's really important for everybody to have this skill in their toolkit, if you like, for when they might need it. When they're in a situation where they may feel the workload, they're being overwhelmed, and instead of having that assertive conversation, they just say yes.
Yeah.
And then we end up with staff that are not performing, that feel stressed.
Yeah.
And if we can avoid that, that would be really great.
Yeah, it's hugely important for communication to avoid conflict. You touched on it earlier when you said about the difference between assertiveness and aggression. So perhaps you could kind of delve into that a bit deeper. You know, how is assertiveness different from aggression or passivity?
Definitely. So first, just to clarify what assertiveness is not, it's not being forthright about your wants and needs with disregard for everybody else. So that's where the aggressive side comes in.
Yeah.
And I think all of us have done that at some stage. I definitely have.
Yeah.
I can get a little bit focused on my needs, my department needs, my team needs, and not really open that wider up to other people. So assertiveness is not being aggressive with what you want at the cost of everyone else.
Absolutely.
Taking what you want regardless of the needs of others or other departments or other people's feelings. So again, it's very much about being honest and open, not looking to just get your own way. And assertiveness is not listening to others or giving others the opportunity to give a point of view.
Sure.
So where the passivity, which is a great word, not easy
Sorry,
to say.
it's a bit of a tongue twister for a Monday morning.
That can be, and I've experienced it actually today with a colleague in the hospice environment, where they actually are saying yes and everything's okay, but then behind that they're actually not being positive with other people that they're talking to.
Sure.
So for me, passivity is around not actually voicing what you're really thinking, and almost in some ways self-sabotaging or not doing the work that's required, but not voicing that either. So that's my understanding of the difference.
Yeah, amazing. So we've kind of, touched on the theory of assertiveness now, but we need to delve into the practical elements of this. So, how can somebody actually start being more assertive in the workplace?
Okay, so one of the really good things to do is rehearsal.
Okay.
So, and it sounds a bit naff when we talk about it like that, but often when I've been coaching people or talking to people, they will come back with, I know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
If I say X, they will say Y.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you know that, you can rehearse and you can then keep it quite tight around not being sidetracked. But remember what we talked about before, you still need to listen.
Yeah.
You still need to give people their opportunity. But what you also need to do is think, okay, I know that they're going to come back with, well, it's your fault or whatever.
Yep.
And it's how you then keep that on track. Now, some of that is around, you can do it in your head. You can have a rehearsal of, well, I'm going to say, actually, and I have had an example of this, which I've used with a colleague recently, my boss, where they've said, oh, I really need you to do this by Friday. And I'd planned my week because I was going on annual leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back and said, I'm really sorry. I've planned my week. I can't actually do that by Friday unless you're happy for me to drop X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
So I knew that when I had that conversation, I was strong enough to already be able to answer that. But if I wasn't as confident, and confidence and judgment is a big thing in being assertive,
Sure.
I think I could have preempted that might happen. And then how might I respond? Because if I was being passive, I would do it, but I would be grumpy about it and I'd be frustrated and stressed and unhappy. So it is really a very doing a rehearsal either in your head or with a friend.
Yeah.
That could be quite fun actually, and she could get them to be as awkward as possible.
Yeah.
And it's around practicing and using good statements and not panicking. So I think for me, a big part of how I normally would train someone to be more confident and assertive is to have those rehearsals in the end in your head. What are they likely to say?
Yeah.
How am I going to deal with a blanket no approach?
Yeah.
How can I start bringing in those I statements? How can I think about, am I also being fair?
Yeah.
Am I listening? Or am I listening, half listening, but in my head, I'm already panicking about the implications of that request to my workload or to what I'm doing.
And outside of rehearsal, are there any other techniques people can use to sort of overcome any fears that they have about conflict? I mean, that would be one of the biggest barriers here to assertiveness, is they fear the outcome, and fear the conflict that might come from that conversation. So, what practical tips can we give people to deal with that fear of conflict?
I know it sounds really obvious, but resilience is a skill that has to be developed,
Yeah,
and you're not going to go from being um, having been quite passive or not voicing anything to assertive in one easy lesson. If you
yeah.
are, then obviously I'm a really good teacher. But actually, you're not going to. So things you can do. We've talked about the rehearsal.
Yep.
Get your head into the right mindset. This isn't personal.
Yeah.
This is not, you're not saying no to the person,
Hmm.
you're saying no to the task.
Sure.
And if you think about that in your head, I've made mistakes before where I've got a colleague who I get on with really, really well, and I've agreed to do work that I really shouldn't have agreed to.
Mm.
And then it's caused me stress. So it's around really thinking about it in your head. It's not about the person you're having that conversation with,
Yeah.
it's about the task that's being asked.
Yeah.
So that's another thing you can do. You can try building up to it with from my point of view.
Hmm.
So you're actually introducing, this is what it looks like for me.
Yeah, it's
And
really
again,
valid.
getting them to think that way. Um, Consider what the response to your I statements might be. So if you say, I'm unhappy about that, I'm not able to do that, just think about how that's coming back. Is there a win win situation?
Yeah.
Is there something that you can both do? Take time to find ways to get your needs met without actually making it difficult for the other person. So, a bit like I said earlier, actually saying, okay, what do you want my priorities to be?
Yeah.
Can we narrow that down a little bit? And I think we've all had that
Yeah.
with my management style. I quite often expect everything tomorrow, if not today, and it's around thinking about those sort of things. So even when you're doing um, your rehearsals and all of those things, I think there's some other things. I think don't wait for someone to recognise what you need.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult when everyone's really, really busy, for managers and for colleagues and for our volunteers
Mm.
to actually um, get their point of view across. So if they're waiting for someone to recognise it, they may be waiting a long time. I think it's important to actually be confident
Mm.
enough to ask for that. If you want to reach your full potential, your needs will need to be met,
Yeah.
but you need to be realistic. So if there's a course you want to do, or you'd like to go and visit somewhere else, or you've got an idea, then I think you've got to start having that confidence, which is not easy, and
Yeah.
that's why assertiveness takes time.
Yeah.
To actually make those opportunities happen. No one else is going to do it for you.
Yeah.
They're not, well, it's very rare they're going to knock on your door and say, hey, I've got opportunities for you. Take care to find ways to get your needs met, which actually are realistic for the service, for the department,
Yeah.
for the team as a whole. So, when people are doing their appraisals, that's a really great opportunity to be quite assertive
Yeah.
and identify what you need to do. Does that sort of answer
Yeah,
that?
no, absolutely. And I suppose it's really important, to distinguish that assertiveness isn't necessarily one size fits all. It's not necessarily the need to be assertive when you're saying no to something, like you've just touched on. It can be within appraisals where you're making a request for something. And so I guess in that instance, it's really important to make sure that you're backing up anything you're requesting with sort of evidence-based information
Yeah,
as
facts.
to
Yeah.
why what you're requesting is really important for all parties involved.
I would also say that you need to accept that you're not responsible for other people's behaviour and actions.
Yeah,
There's only one person you have total control of, and that's
yeah,
yourself. So if someone does get frustrated with something, that's not really your fault. And that's a big lesson to learn,
Yeah.
and it takes a few years. I think I've got it now, but there's times when you sort of think that. And I think don't make the mistake of accepting responsibility for how people react to your assertive statements.
Yep.
You can only control you. I can't emphasize that enough. And it'll be a change. If you've not been like this, they're going to be a bit taken aback when you're suddenly a bit stronger, and you're sort of being more assertive around your needs and wants. As long as you're not violating someone else's needs, then you have the right to say or do what you want.
Yeah.
It's not, you have those rights as well.
Mm.
And then allow yourself to be angry, but also always respectful.
Yeah.
Don't say what's on your mind. I've taken a while to learn that. Anyone who knows me would laugh at that one. But do it in a way that protects the other person's feelings if you can.
Yeah, mutual respect is really important when you're dealing with assertiveness, so it doesn't sort of bubble over into sort of aggression. And I suppose body language is hugely
Yep.
important when you're trying to be assertive in a physical one-on-one situation. That you don't have naturally aggressive body language, so that in your head you're being assertive, but you look like you're coming across as aggressive.
I think that's very true. So, that rehearsal again,
Yeah.
dealing with someone else, how you lean forward, how you lean back. I also think that assertiveness builds on self confidence. So it isn't today I'm not assertive, tomorrow I am going to be.
Yeah.
It's around having that. And also, self confidence is all about judgment, ability, and attitude. I've got to be honest, I might have rehearsed and be ready for a strong conversation with a colleague. And then I read the signs and I think today's not the day.
Mm.
So that's around judgment.
Yep.
That's around looking at your own attitude and whether it can be just pushed back. That's when you've been able to plan it. You've got control of what you want to say. But there's a lot of times when you haven't had that time to plan. So you do need to be rehearsing as often as you can until you get those basics done. And also, in general, assertive people can quickly find common ground. Our doers feel empowered to problem solve and are less stressed because they're dealing with it and they're not going home with this baggage that they might have, oh, I wish I'd have said that.
Yeah.
And I think realistically, you want to be thinking 3 to 6 months to get from I don't say anything to I'm now building my confidence at 3 months, and at 6 months you've got those skills that you can bring into play when you need to. But it is one of the things I say is it's not always necessarily easy, but it's a skill that if you can get it so you're comfortable with challenging
Yeah.
in a supportive way, then your life will get a lot easier, and also your colleagues and your managers will get to understand you as well and realise, that they can talk to you, because you will say if you can't do something, you will acknowledge your workload.
Yeah.
You're not then, I'm sure we've all done it in our younger days or early career, where you moan behind someone's back about what's happened. And that's really not great. That's not a culture we want in any hospice
No.
environment or anywhere really.
No.
It's a lot easier to stand up for you and confront and challenge people, but always have that thought in your mind that where possible, control your emotion. It's not about the person, it's about the task.
Exactly. And we have already touched on a bit of language and phrasing around having these conversations to sort of maintain respect while still being assertive. But I guess it's really integral to use terminology along the lines of, I understand this is important to you, however.
Yeah. I think it's around using strong I statements.
Yeah.
I want to make you aware of the
Yeah.
workload that I've got to get through in this time frame.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, You know, I feel under pressure. And it can go the other way. I feel you're not giving me enough to do. You're not challenging me. It's not all on the, and I think I maybe haven't made that as clear as I could thus far in the podcast, but it can be the other way.
Yeah.
I'm ready for more and you're not seeing me.
Yeah.
I'm keen to develop, but the opportunities don't seem to be there. It's around, we've talked about appraisals, but we all have regular one-to-ones.
Yeah.
It's around building that relationship.
Yeah.
And if you do get on really well with other people, is say, I'm developing my assertiveness skills. This is what how do you feel when I say this and do that?
Yeah, that's a really
So
good point.
I feel, I want, can you understand?
Yeah.
All those sort of things. And again, I think there's another thing I'd like to bring in there is setting your boundaries with what you can and can't do. Know your limits. Know that you can't do everything. Know that you will never please everybody.
No.
We know that at home, we know it at work,
Yeah.
and we know it in lots of different ways. Go with what is right for you. If possible, suggest alternatives. So if someone says, I really need this report, say, excellent, I want to do the report for you. However, I can't do that until this date. Set your own timescales with your line manager, with colleagues, with someone that's requesting something for you. And I'll be honest, I often give myself a day's wiggle room because things will come that you're not expecting. And it's around starting to have that awareness and your team having that awareness of your workload and what's going on with you. So I think they're all quite important things to do. And I think often someone who is struggling to be assertive are not very good at taking compliments either. So, criticism and compliments should be taken in the same sort of light.
Yeah.
But what I have experienced, particularly in the hospice environment, is that we focus on what we haven't done well. We will look at, and I understand that from some of the clinical point of view.
Yeah.
If we make an error, it can be a big deal. But I also think it's around constructive feedback.
Yeah.
And not always around you didn't do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But I found it really interesting that a lot of my clinical colleagues struggle when I give them a compliment. And actually, they both sit very well with being gracious, allowing yourself to make mistakes, but also allowing you to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah.
But acknowledge when you've done a really good job.
Yeah.
And I think that leads into assertiveness in a way that when you start to look at what you're doing well, then your confidence improves, and then your judgment takes control, and you start being able to do that. Accepting feedback positively, be prepared to discuss, but do not get defensive or angry is a skill I'm still working on. I sometimes find when it's about my team, I will get a bit defensive.
Yeah.
And that's because that protective nature comes in. And I'm still working on that. So I don't think you're ever completely good at all of this. It's a journey and you have to learn that. And I can be here on this podcast saying, do this, do that. But I still sometimes, last week I got very defensive about something and I couldn't stop myself.
Yeah.
I got into that feeling, and then at the end I actually apologized and said, I know I got really defensive there.
A lot of the time that is born from passion,
Yeah.
and if you're passionate about something and you're passionate about the outcome of something, then your need to be assertive around that topic, I suppose, can sort of blur the lines as to maybe looking like it's coming across as defensive, but that's not necessarily the aim. But it's good to be passionate.
Yeah.
And we want our people to be passionate.
And I think as well, it's around making the opportunity. So not everyone is very good at being assertive in a group situation.
Yeah, fair.
So, if you know you're not, then make use of that one-to-one time, or create an opportunity to have a one-to-one, so that you do feel you can be honest, you can be assertive. And again, I keep saying it, but it's about the task, not the person you're dealing with.
Yeah.
What are the most important things to me in this situation? What you're unable to compromise on. We all know that we compromise, and we try and make the working environment, a positive environment. But there are things you feel in your role, and you as a person can't compromise on.
Yeah.
And it's knowing what they are. I can give an example in a teaching environment, which is quite neutral, which might help our listeners. And that's around, if I find it really difficult if someone, when I was teaching, would come into a lesson late. I thought it was a bit disrespectful. That was a trigger for me. And also if they kept looking at their phone.
Yeah.
And it was a lot easier then than it is today. I think that's just not respectful to the others in the room and me as a teacher. So I knew that that was something I couldn't compromise on, and I also knew it would be a trigger for me. So I shared that very early on with my learners and said, this is my boundary.
Yeah.
This is what I'm not good at compromising on. And, please, there will always be occasions you might be late, but please make the effort, as I have, to be here on time. And unless it's for children or emergency, I prefer you to turn your phone off. Really think about the things that might trigger you before you're in a situation. Know that what might trigger you. Know that, everyone will be in a situation that might trigger them, and you might respond aggressively, but then have the confidence or honesty to say, oh, that was a little bit aggressive.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to be like that. So that's something I would definitely think about, wherever possible, is, what can you not compromise on? What can you not back down from? And even saying that seems like a little bit harsh, but I think it is true.
Yeah. And I guess in an environment like we work in, particularly the clinical side of things, where it's very demanding and very time oriented, it's about taking a step back and maybe not reacting in the moment, particularly if you're looking to question something. It's about stepping away, digesting, like you've touched on, rehearsing, and then approaching that conversation when you're ready to be assertive, as opposed to perhaps reacting in the moment and coming across as aggressive.
I would definitely agree with that. And I think it's around, as we touched on before, taking the emotion out of the situation. When we talk about reflective practice, clinical supervision, all of these tie in with taking time away from the situation to think about it. And also be aware that you may have caused the problem. We're not, nobody is perfect. And sometimes what you perceive as the situation is not. There's always change going on. The culture is changing all the time. And it's around finding your way within that new environment and being able to say, and put your hands up when you have. And for me, I would much rather have someone be passionate and be really in my face about something. But I also appreciate that we're all different personalities, and it can be, as a manager, it can be really easy to miss the quiet passivity person who's not voicing their things because they don't have the confidence to. So, that bit where we said, don't wait for someone to notice, actually give them the opportunity by saying, actually, can I have a one-to-one? Can we just have a quick chat? There's something I'm a bit, I'd like to talk to you about. That takes confidence, and I hope that's where we're getting to.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've touched on a huge amount just in this short conversation. But if you could just sort of wrap up with one piece of advice out of everything that we've touched on about assertiveness, what would it be?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I think it would be practice,
Yeah.
rehearse, maybe do some research if you've got time.
Yeah.
Look at videos of people being assertive and aggressive, and actually remember to have a sense of humour about some of this. You're going to make mistakes, but yeah, my one sentence would be rehearse, practice, I statements.
Amazing. So we've covered what assertiveness is, practical ways to apply it, and how to overcome barriers. But just for our listeners, before we finish, here are some reflection questions that perhaps you can take away and think about. Once you've finished listening to this podcast, when was the last time you needed to be assertive, and how did that go? What situations make assertiveness hard for you? And what's one technique that you might try this week to communicate more assertively? So that's us all done for today. Thanks for joining us, Mandy. It's been great to chat with you.
Thank you very much.
And I hope you have a great week.
Thank you.